Gen Z doesn't hate work, they just hate working for nothing. The 9-to-5 job, while normalized today, is actually a pretty recent invention in the grand timeline of human history. It emerged during the earlier days of the Industrial Revolution as a solution, a way to limit the grueling hours factory workers once endured. For a time, it worked. You'd dedicate decades to one company, and in return you'd get stability, health insurance, a pension, a reliable raise, maybe even a house and enough income to support a family on a single salary. But that world is gone. The modern landscape isn't built for the 9-to-5 anymore, and younger generations have been calling this out for years.
Here's the sad reality. You're all replaceable. You may think you're so important at work, but you're not.
Somebody could give me $500,000 and say, here, work this 9-to-5 job for the next 60 years. You, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it.
Work has evolved, our economy has shifted, and the tools we use, especially AI, are reshaping everything about how we earn a living. So, what now? If AI takes the jobs we once relied on, do we all just become entrepreneurs? Is that really the fix? Or should we be working towards something deeper, something that recreates the balance and security the 9-to-5 once promised without clinging to a model that no longer fits the world we live in? Let's explore the death of the 9-to-5 and the rise of AI and what it means for the future of work. Now, before the whole 9-to-5 thing became the standard, work was way less structured. Most people farmed, ran small shops, or did trades, and they worked when the work needed to get done. No punch clocks, no office hours, just tasks and survival. Then the Industrial Revolution came along and changed everything. Factories needed people to show up at the same time every day for long hours, like 12 to 16 hours a day, 6 days a week. Eventually, workers got fed up and started organizing. Their motto was basically 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, and 8 for whatever else. And in 1926, Henry Ford actually made that happen, kind of. He cut his factory workers' hours down to 40 a week, not because he was being generous, but because he realized it made them more productive and gave them time to spend the money they earned, fueling the consumer economy and, of course, buying their own Ford cars. By 1938, the Fair Labor Standards Act made the 40-hour workweek and overtime pay federal law in the US, and thus the 9-to-5 became the norm, a balance between labor, rest, and consumption, optimized for the industrial and consumer economy. Speaking of the consumer economy, let's talk about today's sponsor, Raycon. I know most of y'all probably forgot, but Mother's Day is coming up. Are you really gonna let her keep wearing those musty headphones she picked up inside the tech store in the airport? Or are you gonna let her enjoy her 70s music and long phone calls with Raycon's newest model of everyday earbuds? It's got 32 hours of battery life and multi-point connectivity that lets her connect to 2 devices at once. So she'll never ask you why her Bluetooth isn't working ever again, right? Right. And Raycon is a really affordable option with the same kind of sound quality you can expect from the most popular in-ear wireless headphone brands. I gave the Raycons a test run, and I'm surprised how comfy they felt in my ear. I feel like I have really weird shaped ear holes that make it so that most in-ear headphones just fall out of my ears really easily, but these didn't. And the active noise cancellation feature is super useful when I'm locked in doing work in a public space or outside, but I don't want to be distracted. They're some of the most comfortable earbuds I've tried at this price point, and your mom is going to nearly jump for joy when she hears you got them for her.
Hello?
Mom, I got some big news for Mother's Day.
Oh, you do? What is it?
I got your Raycons.
I have no idea what that is.
So if you're interested, you can go to buyraycon.com/Hastings to get 20% off site-wide. Brought to you by Raycon, and thanks again to them for sponsoring this video. Now, like I stated in the intro, the 9-to-5 doesn't really fit how the world works today, and younger generations know it. This system was built almost a century ago, back when people were working in factories, not on laptops. In today's workforce, many roles demand creativity, constant communication, and technological proficiency, yet the traditional 9-to-5 schedule persists, often misaligned with the actual flow of work. Employees frequently find themselves in one of two scenarios, either waiting idly for the next assignment or overwhelmed with continuous mental tasks that extend beyond official working hours. And this imbalance often leads to unpaid overtime, which then leads to stress and burnout. A study by the Institute for Work and Health found that nearly 1 in 10 employees engage in unpaid overtime weekly, with increased hours correlating to higher stress levels. This trend was continuing to go up, and then the pandemic hit and it slowed everything down. For the first time in a long time, people had space to reflect. Questions that had been quietly bubbling under the surface. Is this job actually fulfilling? Am I being paid what I'm worth? Is this lifestyle even sustainable? Suddenly became impossible to ignore. And for a lot of people, especially younger workers, the answer was clear: no. So they walked away, and that mass shift became known as the Great Resignation. During that time is when remote work really started to take off. People worked from home, avoided the commute, and still got their work done, often working more hours than before. In fact, a study by Connect Solutions found that 77% of remote workers reported higher productivity, and 30% said they accomplished more in less time. Big companies like Amazon, Microsoft, and Google saw record profits during that period. So from the outside, it looked like a win-win. People were happier, companies were thriving, and going into the office started to look optional. But here's where things get a little more nuanced. Remote work definitely has its perks, but it's not perfect, and particularly because it blurs the lines between work and rest. People end up responding to emails at 10 p.m., hopping on Zoom calls while cooking dinner, and struggling to disconnect. A survey by Owl Labs found that 55% of remote workers felt they were working longer hours from home than they did in the office. Plus, not all work is done better remotely. In-person collaboration has real advantages, especially when it comes to building relationships, brainstorming, or onboarding new employees. A survey conducted by USA Today on 667 remote workers found that 34% feel more isolated from their team, 11% feel more depressed, and 9% feel more burnt out. That's why hybrid models, part in-person, part remote, are becoming the new middle ground. According to a 2023 article in Harvard Business Review, many executives are acknowledging that hybrid work maintains productivity while improving employee satisfaction. And this is where Gen Z really starts to reshape the story. They grew up watching their parents grind away at jobs that didn't always offer stability, purpose, or even basic security. They saw burnout, layoffs, and a system that demanded loyalty but didn't return it. A 2023 Deloitte survey found that work-life balance is Gen Z's and millennials' top consideration when choosing an employer. And they're not shy about wanting flexibility. A report from Johns Hopkins University found that 73% of Gen Z employees want permanent flexible work options. And honestly, it's hard to blame them. Younger workers aren't asking for less responsibility, although, a few of them probably are. They're just asking for work that actually makes sense. They care more about what gets done than how many hours they spend pretending to be busy. They want flexibility, balance, and a sense of control over their time, and if employers don't offer that, they're willing to walk away. A 2022 ADP survey found that 64% of Gen Z would consider quitting if they were forced back into full-time office work. So when people ask, why don't young people just settle into a steady 9-to-5 anymore? It's not because they're lazy, it's because that old version of stability doesn't really exist like it used to. And now AI is really speeding this process up. Jobs that used to feel untouchable, graphic design, coding, copywriting, even legal and medical analysis, are being partially or fully automated. And it's happening pretty fast. A 2023 Goldman Sachs report estimated that AI could replace the equivalent of 300 million full-time jobs worldwide, and that 2/3 of current jobs in the US and Europe are exposed to some degree of AI automation. But here's some more nuance, and positive nuance. Automation does not always mean elimination. In many cases, AI is being used to augment human workers, not replace them entirely. According to a 2023 report by the World Economic Forum, while 83 million jobs may be lost to AI and automation by 2027, another 69 million are expected to be created, mostly in tech, sustainability, education, and healthcare. Still, that shift isn't really smooth. For people in traditional 9-to-5 jobs, this is destabilizing. AI tools like ChatGPT, Midjourney, and Copilot are making it possible for smaller teams or even individuals to produce the kind of work that once required entire departments. That means fewer hires, more freelance contracts, and an increasing pressure on current employees to do more with less. A 2025 Pew Research survey found that 52% of employed adults were more worried than hopeful about AI in the workplace, and 32% think it will lead to fewer job opportunities in the long run. But here's where things start getting even more complicated. AI isn't just replacing jobs, it's redefining how we think about work. In some industries, it's creating more freedom. People can automate busy work, streamline workflows, and focus on more meaningful tasks. But in others, it's having the opposite effect, creating an environment where workers feel like they're constantly competing with machines just to prove their value. A study from MIT and Stanford found that using AI tools increased productivity for customer service workers by up to 14%, but the biggest gains were among less experienced workers, while top performers saw almost no benefit. So for some, AI is this sort of leveling tool. For others, it's a threat. And then there's the whole mental health toll aspect of this. As workers are pushed to adapt to faster systems, higher expectations, and constant change, burnout becomes more likely, especially in companies that use AI to squeeze every drop of output from their employees. A 2023 report from McKinsey & Company revealed that while many companies plan to implement AI to cut costs, only 16% of organizations say they're actively addressing the equity and fairness AI might affect among employees. It's a conversation about identity, purpose, and how we define value in a world where machines can do so much of what we used to call work. And this circles back to the 9 to 5, because if the traditional workday was already feeling outdated, then AI is pushing it even further into irrelevance. The model of sitting in a chair for 8 hours to be seen as productive is directly challenged by technologies that can perform entire workflows in seconds. In this new reality, workers aren't asking for less work, they're asking for more meaningful work that's human, flexible, and not constantly measured against a machine. But if companies don't adapt, if they treat AI as a replacement instead of a tool, if they ignore worker well-being while chasing productivity metrics, then we may be headed to a future where inequality, burnout, and unemployment all rise together. The death of the 9 to 5 might be inevitable, but the real question is, what takes its place? Well, for now, the most viable answer for a lot of people is to take control of their work into their own hands. And that's why we're seeing a massive shift toward freelancing, gig work, and entrepreneurship. A growing belief that if traditional jobs no longer offer stability or purpose, the safest bet is to become your own boss. When the traditional path no longer offers stability and AI begins to automate more roles, it makes sense that people would want to take back some control. And today, that is easier than ever. Thanks to platforms like Fiverr, Upwork, YouTube, Shopify, Substack, Patreon, and TikTok, starting a solo business or freelance career now requires less upfront investment than ever before. You don't need to rent a storefront, hire employees, or print flyers. All you need is a laptop, an internet connection, and a niche. According to the US Census Bureau, a record 5.5 million new business applications were filed in 2023 alone, marking the third consecutive year of historic highs. At first glance, this sounds like a booming entrepreneurial moment. Historically, a surge in new business formation has been seen as a sign of a healthy, growing economy, one where people have access to capital, confidence in their financial future, and see real opportunity in the market. It usually suggested that people were taking risks because they felt secure enough to do so, but that's not really what's happening today. People who couldn't find reliable work turned to entrepreneurship as a last resort. In fact, a 2021 Pew Research study found that 28% of people cited not having many other job opportunities in their area as a major reason for taking on gig work. And a 2024 Bankrate survey found that 32% of side hustlers thought they would always need a side hustle to make ends meet. And nowhere is this clearer than in the rise of gig workers on platforms like DoorDash and Uber Eats. While these apps are often marketed as flexible side gigs, many rely on them out of necessity, not choice. A 2020 survey by the Economic Policy Institute found that 19% of gig workers reported going hungry because they couldn't afford enough to eat, and 30% had to rely on SNAP benefits within just 1 month of the survey. The same study found that 14% of gig workers earned less than the federal minimum wage, and nearly 1/3 earned below their state's minimum wage. So while these gig jobs can offer flexibility and autonomy, they often come with no health insurance, no retirement contributions, no paid time off, and inconsistent income. The freedom can feel empowering until you get sick or hit with a dry month or find yourself undercharging to stay competitive. It's also worth mentioning that freelancing success is incredibly uneven. The top earners are usually the ones taking home the majority of the income, while many others even struggle to break even. And if you scroll through social media, well, you're gonna see a very curated version of this story. Online influencers paint entrepreneurship as the ultimate escape from the 9-to-5 rat race. They mock employees as wage slaves and claim that anyone can achieve financial freedom if they just hustle hard enough. But that narrative has some serious flaws. First, it leans heavily into survivorship bias. For every story you see of success, there are countless other stories of people who did the same exact thing and didn't make it. But you don't usually hear those stories, and they don't go viral, partly because a lot of people don't want to hear that, and also because the people who are successful, who did see survivorship bias play a role, are the ones who are the best at getting seen in a social media algorithm and promoting their stuff. According to a 2023 report by NeoReach, nearly half of all content creators earned $15,000 or less annually, with only 13% surpassing the $100,000 mark. ZipRecruiter data indicates that the average annual salary for a social media influencer in the US is approximately $57,928, with the top 10% earning around $91,000. However, these figures can be misleading, as they often don't account for the expenses associated with content creation, such as equipment, marketing, and time investment. Secondly, many of the influencers selling you this dream are only doing so because selling the dream is their business. Their income comes from courses, affiliate links, and how to make money online guides. They're not building the next Amazon, they're building pipelines to monetize your desire to escape the very system they claim to have beaten. It's not that every influencer is a scam artist. Some are genuinely offering value and selling incredibly useful courses and guides. But many are just better at selling the course than running the kind of business that course claims to teach. And here's the bigger question nobody seems to be asking. What happens if everyone becomes their own boss? Who's left to be the employee? Who builds the roads, staffs the hospitals, keeps the systems running? If everyone is hustling independently, fighting for attention, negotiating contracts, and managing their own brand, does anything actually get built at scale? The truth is, an economy made up entirely of freelancers or entrepreneurs can't function like a traditional society. Certain roles require long-term collaboration, structure, and, yes, employees. So while the rise of freelancing and entrepreneurship gives people more agency, we have to be honest about its limits. Not everyone wants to or is able to become their own boss. Not every job should be a hustle. And if we let that become the only viable path forward, we risk building a future where security, stability, and community are luxuries reserved for the lucky few who make it, while everyone else just keeps scrambling to stay afloat. So if the traditional 9-to-5 is fading, and freelancing and entrepreneurship isn't a one-size-fits-all solution, what comes next? If anyone claims they have a definitive answer to that question, run. You gotta understand, nobody has ever lived in the era in which we are living in right now. To an extent, a lot of the stuff we're doing is just winging it and hoping it works. And predicting exactly what the future is gonna look like or the exact thing we need to do is almost impossible. But there are people, policymakers, and communities that are actively thinking about not perfect solutions, but possible paths forward. Some suggest what is called a cooperative workplace. Worker-owned cooperatives are built around a simple principle. Employees own the company, share the profits, and make decisions collectively. Unlike traditional corporate models, co-ops don't funnel profit upward to investors, they redistribute it across the people who do the work. But co-ops aren't easy to scale. Decision-making can be slow, and they often struggle to access the capital needed to expand, especially in industries where competition is fast and investor funding dominates. Still, they represent a democratic approach to employment and could be part of a more diversified system, especially at a local level. Another approach, which might seem obvious, is to simply make traditional jobs better. Increased labor protections, higher minimum wages, mandatory paid leave, stronger safety nets, and universal healthcare are all policy-level solutions that could make the 9-to-5 or any full-time work feel less like a trap. According to the OECD, countries with stronger worker protections, like Germany, the Netherlands, and Sweden, report higher overall worker satisfaction and lower job-related stress, even in traditional employment setups. Of course, policy change is slow. It varies wildly by country and region, and it depends on political will, something that's often lacking when worker protections come up against corporate interests. But it's a reminder that not every solution needs to be personal. Sometimes the system itself needs fixing. Rather than replacing one system with another, we could also change this tech oligarchy we find ourselves in, at least in America, to a more hybrid economic model that's akin to other countries. In a hybrid economy, you could have a part-time traditional job, supplemental freelancer creative work, universal basic income to cushion instability, access to healthcare regardless of employment, and a say in the workplace through cooperative governance. But managing that kind of complexity would admittedly be pretty difficult, and I'm not the guy to ask on how to implement it. And finally, there's AI. Right now, a lot of us are asking, how many jobs will AI replace? But the real question we should be asking is, how can AI free us to do the kinds of work we actually want to do more of? A 2023 report by the IBM Institute for Business Value found that 87% of executives believe AI will augment, not replace, human roles in the next 5 years. But only 28% of CEOs have assessed the potential impact of generative AI on their current workforce. So we're not just facing a technology gap, we're facing a vision gap. Because we know AI has the potential to automate the boring stuff, emails, scheduling, invoicing, repetitive tasks, and allow people to focus on problem solving, care work, art, teaching, and human connection. And it has the potential to be used for shit like this too. But that only happens if companies choose to deploy AI for workers and not against them. If they treat AI as an accelerator, not just a cost cutter. And that will come down to leadership, ethics, and pressure from workers, lawmakers, and consumers alike. The death of the 9-to-5 doesn't mean we have to toss out all structure, but if we're gonna move on from it, we've gotta be thoughtful about what we build next. Not just something that moves quicker or gives us more freedom, but something that's actually better, more fair, more grounded, and more human. I would love to hear your thoughts about all this in the comments below. I think there's going to be some juicy, useful comments. So leave them in the comments. And if you want to watch another video essay on modern issues, which I do all the time on this channel now, you can check out the whole playlist right here. If you want to explore these things that are going on in the world that maybe aren't being talked about enough in your social circles. So check those out. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.